see if that works. Okay.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Morning. Let's talk about stretch or not to stretch. One of those hot topics in the past 3 decades been changing a lot. But that isn't really the question, and I'll get deeper into that as we go along. I need a more specific question. First of all, some introductions. I'll tell you how I got to this point in my brain. And how I met my wife too, but I went to McMaster University, for those that don't know me, for 4 years, and then I decided to get certified as a Ontario kinesiologist and worked as one, and then I didn't find that as dynamic or fulfilling, so I became a personal trainer in Ontario in a couple places, and then I moved to the mountains. Jobs weren't really available for personal trainers, so I went to the Rimrock, scrubbed a lot of hot tubs. I worked in Sally Gordon building, doing ergonomic analyst work. And then I said, fine, I'll go to Canmore. I'm not going to go to Calgary, I'll go to Canmore. And then I worked at NAC for a couple of years. And during that time in the mountains, the ripe old age of, what was I, 25, or I got into downhill mountain bike racing. And then I broke my neck. Became a quadriplegic for a good hard week, and then it took me about a year to recover. I got better. Here I am. And then after that, I actually did become a pro for 1 year, and then I opened up LifeWorks, and definitely no time to do anything like that. But LifeWorks Gym, I kind of built that around a hub of high quality personal training, and in the gym and the memberships and the classes I wanted that to circulate around that hub. And over time, I had this huge thirst for getting more information. I couldn't get enough information. Every time I go to a conference, I feel really stupid. And I feel like, wow, I can't believe I just learned that. I thought I knew a lot, but now I feel like I know nothing. So I go to conferences a lot. I'm like one of those guys that just love that. And now that I can talk about stuff, when I do get it, it helps me organize my thoughts, and I'm starting to have a lot of fun doing this kind of presentation. And then I hired Jessie, and then I married her. And she's helping me run this place, and she put me into place as well. So there's my introductions. Congratulations, Canada. I just banked on it that they're going to win.
Yes.
And I'm doing this talk, and I'm giving donations to Key McKenzie. I guess my friends all watched the hockey game this morning and might be drunk, but they're supposed to come here. And Key McKenzie is one of my best friends, Daniel, and he had a baby a couple of years ago and died from a brain tumor. So we died conquer cancer, and so that's what the donations are for. I do this all the time. Just get used to it, right? And, so there's a pink box back there if you haven't done so already, just to make a little donation. And this is so we actually donate directly to infants with brain tumors, and so we get actually to choose and tunnel that donation, which is good. So we done the ride last year, and we're doing the ride this year. So on to the talk. And everyone can see that okay? I guess it gets better with some of the other slides, but we're going to talk with the who, what, when, where, why, and the part is putting it all together. I'm going to give you lots of information today, and then I'm going to organize that information for you, and then hopefully it'll give you something tangible that you can do with that information. Who should stretch? Should this person stretch? Definitely not. Definitely not the lower back. Tight people should stretch for sure. And there's different kinds of stretching, which is the what. What types of stretching techniques are there. I'm going to go into talking a lot about debunking the static style of stretching. And the static style of stretching is basically putting a joint into a range of motion without firing any muscles and just holding it there for a period of time. But there's lots of different kinds, like dynamic stretching is what I tend to do a lot of. There's PNF and ART, Judy does. And there's lots of appropriate times to do these kinds of stretching. But we're going to get a little more specific on the kinds of stretching that I'm going to talk about. And what are we stretching exactly? What we're going to talk about as well. Yoga lengthens muscles, true or false? Who wants to answer that? Is that a 50-50 here?
True.
False. I'm not just picking on yoga, I'm just any kind of stretching. You're not stretching any muscles. Muscles are predetermined genetically. They're myofilaments that cross over top of each other. It's basically your fascial tissue that restricts muscle use or not. So basically, yeah, we're stretching soft tissue. And there's lots of different layers of that. So in the new research, there's always new research coming up. In the past topics, it's all about soft tissue lately. So let's start with one question. What three tissues in the human body move the human body? If we're going to talk about stretching, we got to talk about the tissues that move the human body. So there's three of them. So somebody spit some answers out right now. Muscles, one, yes. Ligaments could be incorporated into the bulk answer of fascial tissue. Yeah, fascial ligaments and tendons and fascial tissue. And there's one more. It's the hard part. It's the hard one. Give you a hint. It's the biggest organ in the human body. Skin. Skin is really big and it's really heavy. And it's got some elasticity to it. So it might as well be functional. It may not yield a lot of elasticity or move your body huge amounts of function, but it does help. So muscle, skin, and fascial tissue. But which one of those tissues moves the body the most? Fascia, yes. You used to think all the time, everything was all about muscle. You go to university or high school and you learn about all the muscles in the human body. You'll learn about the bones too. You learn all about the muscles. You never learn about the fascial tissue. It's just this past decade that we've been doing that. When should we stretch? If she's doing that, you get my new toy here. If she's doing that before she starts running, that's a static stretch, by the way. It's been proven that it does not enhance her performance. If she doesn't look tight either, so she shouldn't even be doing that. And I'll tell you why as we go through this talk. If someone like me, I'm a pretty tight guy. Hey, Allison. If you were to do that and you were tight, you may do it at the end of the run, perhaps. But research is saying never before a static stretch. Where should we stretch? Well, more importantly, if you're a higher end athlete and you are getting ready to do something really dynamic, you want to make sure you're in somewhere where you're quiet, so you're concentrating on your engrams, you're concentrating on your task at hand, and you're not getting distracted. So you're doing better in your performance, and you're going to be less likely to hurt yourself. Hopefully you're wearing something warm, or you're in a warm environment, like cross-country skiers. Hopefully they're wearing a little bit warmer stuff. Or if they're an hour before their task, they can actually be in a warmer place, keep their tissues nice and soft, or liquidy. But on the other hand, if you're just a weekend warrior, just start doing the exact thing that you're supposed to do, but just do it slower and slowly build it up. Now we're into the why. Why do people stretch? Why do people statically stretch? Is what I want to get into more so. depends on what you want to do in life. This is Houdini in a jar. If your goal is to be flexible, and that's all you want to be in life, stretch away and get really loose, and you're going to really destabilize your joints. If you're stretching yourself to be static all the time, where you're getting your joints into a range of motion and they're going to stay in that range of motion, it gets really energy expensive if you plan to be a marathon runner, a downhill skier, stuff like that. You're not going to be stabilizing your joints. But if you want to stretch yourself in a dynamic fashion, you need to be a little more energy efficient, where you get to draw the bow with your elasticity in your skin, in your tendons, your ligaments, and your fascial tissue, and then it releases that energy, so you get more energy efficient, turns the muscles off. So it really depends, and everything we talk about is going to be all about it depends. What you want to do in your life. What do you want to hike? Do you want to swim? Do you want to run? Or do you just want to be really flexible because you want to be in circus?
Neil, doesn't it also help to prevent injuries?
To what? To be flexible?
Well, no, you're stretching.
Yes. And it depends on the type of stretching you're doing and when you're doing it. Yeah, exactly. Depends on your sport's range of motion as well, which we're going to get into as well. Every sport's got a different range of motion in their hips. For example, like a basketball player, they'll never really get down to here before they do a layup. They'll more likely do a super stiffness in their leg, turn their hips into a pogo stick, and bounce off the floor. So you wouldn't really want to stretch your hamstrings down here if you're a basketball player. You want to keep that spring because your hamstrings are your springboard. So there's a point where overstretching is not going to help because it's going to destabilize your joints, because you need to be tight in your joints. And if you don't stretch enough, then there's not going to be range of motion for if you're playing a hockey game or a soccer game where there's change of direction, like in basketball as well. You need that little bit of leeway or buffer point where, if you find out you're going to go an extra range of motion, you need your body to be able to do that as well. So you really have to know your sport. You don't want to do too much or too little. It depends. It really depends. So now the talk's getting more into dynamic stretching and why we should focus really more on warm-up for sport, whether you're an Olympic athlete or you're a weekend warrior or you're a Canmore Olympic weekend warrior, like most of us. We have to keep our body warm, and also we want to direct the blood to the working muscles. When you're static stretching, because I am now comparing static stretching to dynamic stretching and warming up, static stretching will not direct the blood flow to the working muscles. You want to wake up the body, and when you're starting to warm up slowly and you're incorporating some balance in your warm up, so on and so forth, you're going to wake up your body more so in the cerebellum part of the brain. The cerebellum part of the brain is when you tend to drink a lot and it finally gets to the cerebellum and you're losing your balance, and that's what we're talking about, and that's what it's benefiting when you're slowly starting to warm up. Like for example, if you brush your teeth in the morning on one leg and you're using a little balance issues, it really wakes up the body, a little more so than coffee. You should try it. You want to replenish synovial fluid in and around joints. Static stretching doesn't really do that because it doesn't move the body, it doesn't cause a pump for fluids to get in and get out. There's the pump. And the pump also helps with the synovial fluid, but also with the lymphatic system. It's another system where your blood gets filtered and it's not used as much through the heart like the blood system. Pumping, it's pumped through the body with our body moving. So if we stop moving, then that fluid doesn't get circulated through the body and it can just pool and get a little acidic, and down the road you stop moving and disease comes from that pooling of water. So that's what warm-up is good for, to get that lymphatic system going. neural recruitment, which is a big thing too. We have the ability to do a lot of tasks in our body. If you want to think of the recruitment of nerves as pistons in a car, you want to use only 2 cylinders to start. You start moving a little bit more, a little more range of motion, a little more change of directions, then you turn on another couple pistons in the car, and you feel a little stronger. You already have the ability to do that, but you're just turning on levels in your body. And the more you warm up, you hopefully want to get full neural recruitment before you start to do your sport. Because if you don't have full neural recruitment and you just jump into your sport, there's a high chance to get injured for sure. The floodgates, vasodilation of blood vessels. You basically want to warm up to get a sweat on, to cause some blood pressure. Has anyone ever found out if they went mountain biking or any kind of sport, first 10 minutes is like, oh, this is horrible. And after a while, it's like, oh, okay, it feels good. I'm exercising now. You get blood pressure build up, and mechanoreceptors in the blood vessels sense that, sends information to the brain, and finally goes to the bloods, and then the blood vessels just open, and then all the blood with oxygen goes to all the working muscles, and you're like, oh, feels good. Just got over the wall. That's what they call the wall. So vasodilation, and you want to get there before you do your sport. You don't want to get there. Well, if you're doing competition, you want to get there before you do the sport. Like for example, for 24 hours of adrenaline, I'll go do hill repeats and kill myself, get some sweat going, and get the wall over with. And by the time I do my lap, I'm feeling good. It feels better. I'm enjoying the ride. You want to sweat before you start really doing a high intense exercise. That's your cooling system. And then you know you've gone over the wall. So if you hit the wall, if you're starting to sweat. Neural anticipation. It's more of the fine-tuning, timing of sport. It's more for the performance part of sport. And the part of that warm-up, as we get more specifically, is getting the timing and doing like agility ladder type of activities, brain work with your warm-ups. This is an orange. And I picked an orange because you peel the orange, there's lots of fuzz, and I just use that as a metaphor for fascial tissue. You want to separate like fascial adhesions. Fascial tissue, there's really a lot of layers separating skin with organs and blood vessels and bone and separating muscles as well. And the less you move, the more they can solidify or kind of glue together. As well, they can glue together if you're doing a lot of high repetition, one-directional sport. For example, a marathon. You run a marathon, lots of pounding in one direction. There's not much change in direction, and you're going to get lots of swelling, and then that can cause a lot of adhesion as well. So it would be a good idea after a marathon to cool down to keep the separation going. So that's what warm-up does as well. It tries the stuff that's light fascial adhesions. There's a difference between light fascial adhesions and really solid, deep adhesions. If you were at a desk job for 20 years, you've built up a posture, and then you stand up, and you really can't. You just kind of molded into that position. That would be a deep fascial adhesion. You really couldn't break that apart in a simple half-hour warm-up. So let's just talk about the light ones. And turning it more liquid. Fascia is more of a liquid. It should be more liquid than anything. And that's when it's going to be working the most. You're going to be more mobile. That's we want to talk about when you're warming up, and I do this a lot in my TRX class. A lot of you come to. Unlock the shoulder blades. Try to get the shoulder blades independent from the rib cage, because a lot of times they'll just glue to the rib cage. And you also want to get the T-spine rotating more, just so that the lower back doesn't do all the rotating as much. We want to work on your warm-up to unlock the SI joint. the lower back tightness. And by doing that, there's lots of different ways, but just getting the hips through a range of motion, either assisted or not. We warm up to minimize our injury. We warm up to enjoy the sport longer. We warm up to recover from sport faster. We warm up ultimately to enhance your sport experience. So the evolution of warming up, I had some videos, but it seems that when I connected the projector to my computer, the videos don't work anymore, so that's okay. We have come a long way, more than 10 years, and then 10 more years on another talk, different, all over again. I had a really cool video about Teddy Roosevelt warm up and what they did. It was black and white, it was really funny. I just wanted to show it to you for fun. And it was an up-to-date warm up. So, since fascia moves your body the most, and it can cause the most injury in your body, if you get injured, you can blame it mostly on fascia. If you're moving really well, you can blame it mostly on fascia. So that's why we're going to talk more about fascia and dynamic stretching and warm-up. Now you know why we're doing that. I'll give you 14 amazing reasons why. Number one, fascia has 9 times more proprioceptors than muscle. And if you don't know what proprioceptors are, that's just cells in your body telling your body where you are in space and range of motion, in stretch. So tendons and ligaments and fascial tissue has more information on your body's joint range of motion. Which means if you don't have much fascial range of motion, there's high chance of injury for sure. Fascia moves the body more than muscle, and we've been through that. It's because fascia can contract, but you can't, like a muscle, you can't just say, I'm going to contract my bicep. Fascia will contract as you draw the bow. As I go down into here and stretch my hamstring, and then it will, with the range of, with the rhythm as well. You can't just go down here and stop, but you have to go down, and it'll help spring up in many different sports and many different, like exactly through here, he's up in the air, and his left leg is stretched back, and it's going to come forward mainly with just the elastic ability of your fascial tissue. And that's when the muscles turn off. And that's what you needed to do. Moving the body with fascia has more fuel economy than muscle. Because if you're just moving the body with 100% muscle, the muscles are going to be on all the time. You're going to end up being more robotic. And you're not going to be as fluid. So when muscles contract, fascial tissue is off. And when fascial tissue contracts, muscle tissue is off. And you pulse back and forth in movement and in sport. And the best athletes in the world can do that the fastest, like for sprinters in running, for example. The best athletes in the world can do that at the most appropriate times. So their muscles will turn on just as they need to when your foot hits the ground, or not a microsecond too soon or not too late. If it's too late, then your joint can shift a lot more and you can degrade your joints. Fascial strength takes longer to train than muscle, but is longer lasting once obtained. Meaning, well, the 3 different phases of training your body is first one is neural. You can get that right away because, like I said before, we have neural branches, we have neural recruitment. You already have them. So when you start warming up, you can do a couple things pretty good. And then you get a new second set. Now you're feeling like you've got a lot more strength because your body's found out that it needs more, so it gives you a little bit more, it turns on, it wakes you up a bit more. The second phase of training is muscle and bone. It takes about 3 months of a regimen of training, and then you can start getting more dense tissue that way in your muscle and bones. And then the third is fascial. Whether you're trying to tighten up your fascial system if you're too loose, or if you're trying to get more flexibility, it takes around 6 months to 2 years. And it depends on the person for sure. if you're kind of sedentary and you've been at a desk job for a long time and you're really glued together, it could take a couple of years. And I've seen that happen in some clients of mine. And I've seen the progress after 2 years. But once you get there, you can maintain it pretty easily. It's long lasting. And I find it's easier to get clients a little more mobile than to get them a little more tight. Because some people need to be tight in some areas. We'll get into that. Fascial loading turns off the muscles, and that's what we talked about. In this instance here, muscles are loaded up to get the arm in position where it needs to be. Then everything turns off through here and swings through. And then right at the appropriate time, the golf club will hit the ball. Not too soon, not too late. Hopefully, the golf club, your body gets a super sniffus right when the golf club hits the ball, and you hit it straight. If it's a little too late, it could, what's that, hook? I don't know. But you get the idea. Fascia stabilizes joints and movement. Where is fascia stabilizing the joint and movement in these two people? Is fascia stabilizing the joint, the hip joint here, or in here? Anybody? I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
The foot isn't hitting the ground here, so the fascia is stabilizing your joint and the movement. Once the foot hits the ground here, the fascia turns off because the bow hasn't been drawn anymore, and the muscles in the front of your hip flexor and your glutes will just synergistically contract, stabilize that joint, cause a super stiffness, and give you something to push off. So muscle stabilize joints upon ground reaction force, fascia stabilizes joints, basically your air time in a run. Fascia is mostly water with a collagen matrix. Water extrudes from fascia. Now, in a good example is with running. Every time you run, your muscles contract, water will push out of your fascial tissue, and then when you're in the flight phase, water will go back into your fascial tissue, and hopefully that pump is really good. So the best athletes in the world, that pump is just really efficient. You'll find with someone that's inefficient or tight or a little more glued together, they'll go for a run and they'll feel a little acidic or really just really tired and drawn out, and that's when you should start walking to get that fascial tissue replenished again, and then you can start running again. You'll find that you'll be a little more liquefied again. So the sedentary type of people will tend to have a fascial matrix that's kind of chaotic, almost like a hairball type of situation. And the higher end athletes will have more lined up. For example, the tendon, because water goes in and out of the tendon as well. It'd be a lot more linear and easier for water to move in and out. The more organized the collagen matrix, the better the hydrostatic pressure to extrude water. And that's basically what I just said. And it can be trained, so over time, 6 months to 2 years, you can get that matrix a little more organized, and the water can pump in and out. The best way to organize the soft tissue matrix is exercise. Now, I have a sponge over here, and I was just to give you a good metaphor for if you had a bucket of water and you squeeze the sponge, put the sponge in the bucket of water, it fills with water, and you squeeze the sponge in the bucket of water, and then you let go of the sponge and you squeeze the sponge. Basically, that's how the body works with fascial tissue and movement, rhythm and movement. That was just a short little liquid fascial movie. Hope you enjoyed that. Number 8, fascia is an elastic supersuit underneath your skin to draw the bow. I don't need to elaborate on that. More stretch results in an osmotic return. Basically, we're not exactly elastic bands. We are a bunch of water talking to each other, osmotically connected. And so the water kind of separates from itself and then it returns, and then there's millions and millions of connections there. And with the naked eye, it kind of looks like an elastic band. Down the side, it's more like cells connecting to each other. Blood vessels and the lymphatic system are interwoven and stimulated by the fascial pump. Yeah, you can see all the blood vessels interwoven in this fascial tissue, and when your body stretches out, those blood vessels have to stretch out as well with your fascial tissue. And if you're internally rotated and protracted from a lot of desk work, then you do this, and it's all kind of stuck together through here, and then your blood vessels are going to get stressed. Your nerves are going to get stressed because your nerves are in there too, and your lymphatic system's going to get stressed. There's lots of white blood cells that get pumped out of the lymphatic system that helps with immunity in your immune system. So if you can't move your body in full range of motion, then you're not going to stimulate those lymph nodes that pump out some white blood cells for immune system. So it does help to get full range of motion with your body, and you'll be a lot healthier. At the fascia conference with Lisa Hodge, she talked about one of the biggest lymph nodes in the body was around here. And with massage, you could massage that for about 4 minutes maximum to get the most out of that lymph node, and it pumps blood cells through your body for your immune system. So in the same sense, if you can do a dynamic stretch, and you can stretch that torso and that lymph node gets stimulated, then you can get lots of white blood cells pumping through your body. It's another good reason why dynamic stretching is very important. Upper body can stabilize lower body and vice versa. We'll get everyone to stand up and do a little experiment. Get a chance to really do. He's got his arms forward, and it's a good example that you're not doing that right now. And it's a good example of his shoulder blades stabilizing your knees. So what we're going to do is you're going to have to get away from the chair in front of you, for the people that are over there. You're going to do not a lunge, because we've been sitting for a bit. You're going to do a step forward with your hands at your side, and then you can step up. Yeah, do that 3 times and feel how stable you may or may not feel. Now what we're going to do is you're going to, with both hands, step forward and reach over your knee. And you're going to feel how more stable your knee will feel. Now you can sit down. Does anyone feel the difference there, as subtle as it may be? Yeah, so the fascial tissue, if I were to get more specific, it starts at your shoulder blade. There's lots of different connections in your body. It goes underneath your shoulder blade to your serratus anterior, into your internal obliques, to your external obliques, into your TFL, into your IT band, and then to your knee. So if I were to do that, that would stabilize that knee more. It's more like why human beings are programmed to run contralaterally and not unilaterally, not as efficient, right? Whether he knows it or not, they're doing that first to break the gauge, but he's stabilizing his knees a lot more. And you notice that when Chandra Crawford won that gold medal in Torino, she was the only skier really just skiing down for the gold medal, moving her arms, and whether she knew it or not, she was getting a little more power transferred from her arms to her knees as she was doing that skiing. I was in the gym really early in the morning when she was doing that. When I went to the gym at 6, and I was like, whoa, look at her work fascial tissue. Myofibroblasts are stimulated by mechanical means. So myofibroblasts are in your fascial tissue, and they're cells that produce more collagen and produce your network of fascial tissue, and they don't get stimulated by just sitting. You have to move around for it to get to stimulate, because your fascial tissue is mostly water and collagen. And you also get a lot of collagen from eating soups that require a lot of bone marrow, like chicken soup and stuff like that. It's really good for your collagen. Full range of motion movements release calcium from cells. Why do we need calcium for sport? Anybody? Calcium is part of your muscle contraction. So we can get our bodies moving through full range of motion in your warm-up as well as in sport. You're going to produce more calcium and your muscles will fire better. Fascia is organized according to the forces received and transmitted through the body. So this is a piece of wood, and it's a really good idea of how your collagen matrix can look if you're just moving in one direction for your main sport. If that's all you do is just run in one direction, then a lot of your fascial tissue will be organized in one direction. If you're a soccer player changing direction all the time, then your fascial tissue is going to be more adaptive in many directions. So if you're a high-end marathon runner, and then one day you decide to play one game of soccer, there's a high chance of injury because your body's not ready for that change of direction or that deep range of motion you get as you juke to the side. So warm-ups should involve change in direction. Or when you're training your clients or doing a class, hopefully it's not the same every single time. It should be different every single time to keep that chaotic fascial network adaptive. Healthy fascia increases muscular potential. Like I said earlier, your fascia, you can blame your fascia on a lot of your injuries, you can blame your fascia on a lot of your successes. So if your fascia is releasing itself, and the muscle's potential is going to be a lot more stronger. It's not going to be confined and constricted. Does static stretching before any exercise prevent injuries? No. There's some people that will tell you, mostly from the fascia conference I went to a while ago. There is no relationship between static flexibility and dynamic floor performance. So like I said before, stretching out in a static scenario where you're, for example, laying on the floor with your leg up on the wall and you stay there for 3 minutes and just trying to elongate that hamstring, and you're basically going to cause a plastic deformation, which means you're going to lengthen it, but it's not going to recoil. If you put your hand into a Safeway bag and you hold it there, pressing into it slowly over 5 minutes, and then take your hand out, that's probably going to be a depression with your fist, and that's plastic deformation. That's not efficient for sport or human moving, either if you're human walking or hiking or anything. And then at this point, your joints aren't going to be stabilized when you have long fascial tissue like that, especially when your joints are going to react to a ground reaction force and you're really loose in your fascial system. Then your joints are going to shift around, and there's going to be some wear and tear over time and over the years. That's why we need range of motion with rhythm, change of direction. You need force, you need your muscles to contract when you're stretching so you can maintain that recoil. So when we're stretching, we're doing a movement and then you're coming back up. So you're getting into a range of motion. If you're really tight, you may not get range of motion with the first rep, but you're getting a little bit more range of motion as you're getting close to maybe 10 reps, for example. You want to treat your body like you're training, like you're a kangaroo. Good job. I think I only have 10 steps. Initial static stretches can decrease subsequent coordination by resetting some of the organs involved in joint and muscle proprioception. So what that means is when you static stretch, you're stretching some tissues, and there's cells in those tissues, and so therefore you're stretching those cells in those tissues, and you're resetting or decreasing their ability to transmit information. You're dulling the information you're going to set out. So there's another reason why people static stretch, because it feels good. it dulls pain receptors as well. So that it's also kind of giving you some wrong information.
Neil,
Yo.
is that the same as when they tell you to roll, using rollers and foam rollers and balls, and is that similar to static stretching?
Not at all.
No?
Yeah, we're gonna get into that too.
Okay.
But that's a great question. More of the foam rolling is like simulating more massage and trying to, you don't need to warm up before you do the foam rolling, but it's good to help separate layers of adhesions in your fascial tissue and cause blood flow at the same time. Blood flow into the muscles as well as separate fascial adhesions. So not the same thing, but you know, there probably could be some cells that are getting some wrong information from there, but it is pretty painful. But it's definitely not stretching the tissue.
No, okay.
Not to the extent of static stretching anyway. So is it ever appropriate to static stretch? All three of those are correct. And it depends, right? So I'm definitely going to say with the new research, first of all, that static stretching before sport is no. Don't do it. Are there times to static stretch? There's probably some really extreme human beings out there in the world that, like I said, at a desk job for many times, internally rotated, protracted, that may need to lay on a foam roller and sit there for 5 minutes to slowly break that apart. But they're not going to be an Olympic athlete either. So, and there are times when you need to maybe do proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation with a joint or ERT. Some people that have scar tissue from an injury that need to get a certain area of the human body to do some stretching, but as it pertains to warming up, no. But static stretching, yes, depends.
But after your workout.
That depends. If you're really mobile already, and you'd have to find out from somebody, like some people are mobile in some areas and tight in others, and sometimes you're mobile. Sometimes you're tight because you're mobile. So it depends on the human. And I find that if you talk about gender, most men are tighter than women. And that can be because a couple reasons. It could be because women take care of themselves more than men, first of all. They tend to do more yoga than men. They probably have hormones in their body delivering babies as well. That makes it more flexible as well. But I find that more women need to be tighter in some areas, and more men can be more mobile in some areas. And you'll notice that I said mobile instead of flexible. We'll talk about that too.
But you quite often see, a lot of the time anyway, trainers stretching their clients at the end of their session.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore.
You used to, but you don't.
I used to, yeah, definitely I used to.
Mm.
But I don't. I'll do more of a dynamic cool down. I like dynamic cool down. And definitely they'll be, throughout my workout that I give them, they have done a lot of dynamic stretching in full range of motion. So by the time the workout is over, they've done all their stretching. If you want to call it stretching, I would call it mobility. I would call it tensional mobility. And a lot of my clients are women and they're pretty mobile already, and I definitely don't want to make them more inefficient in their joint stability. Now, with this newfound information, do you think static stretching would benefit an athlete?
It depends.
Why? We are not stretching muscle. Static stretching attempts to lengthen one length of a chain of fascia. So like laying your leg up against the wall while you lay on the form, that's attempting to stretch your hamstring and your calves a little bit, but that's just one link of the chain. And if you're a tight person, that's just going to revert back to some tightness. You're going to get way more benefit if you do a hamstring stretch, like a lunge. That includes ground reaction forces, so that you're actually contracting muscle And then if you incorporate your upper body and twist, but my upper body is not loaded, so sometimes a TRX or an elastic band, you can incorporate your upper body through range of motion and load to get the whole chain. And there's many chains in your human body, but you're going to find more benefit from that one tight area, the whole body involved in that stretch. Does that make sense? Static stretching only addresses superficial fascia. So our muscles are kind of like a metaphor for hamburger is a muscle, saran wrap is the fascial tissue. When you're statically stretching, you're only really stretching the saran wrap. There's a lot of fascial tissue interweaving through the muscle that you're not addressing when you're statically stretching. And you need to put some load on those muscles to stretch that fascial tissue. Static stretching does not upregulate fascia, since we said that there are 9 times more proprioceptors in fascial tissue. Static stretching does not turn on those cells to keep your body to get it ready for movement. Coffee, static stretching, cold does not work anyway. So even when I was in university getting ready for a run, this information wasn't out, and we'd all be there, before the run, getting ready. It feels good. You think you're getting yourself there, but the research wasn't there. So if you are going to static stretch, if you are going to do it, you might as well be warm, so it's actually going to be stretching. When you're cold, it's not. It's more like a hard, cold toffee. Otherwise. Static stretching can dull pain receptors, and like I said, some people feel, I got some pain here, I got to stretch it out. And stretching will make it feel good because you're dulling the pain receptors. And if you're hypermobile, you're just going to make it worse. And so it's hard to know. There's your plastic deformation example. Strive for active flexibility at Stuart McGill. I like to call it tensional mobility, same thing. How does a kangaroo warm up? Let's wrap up stretching because I have more to say, but we'll have a little bit of break after this part. So should flexibility be our main goal before we play? That depends. Most cases, no. In preparation for sport, let us not strive for flexibility. Aim for tensional mobility. So you want your body to have range of motion, but you also want your body to have tension for joint stability. You don't want to be so loose that every time you step on the floor, when you're running, that your knee does this. And you can imagine all the joint movement and shear loads in your lower back and in your knees. And you want to enjoy your retirement. You want to use your body in your joints. You don't want to wear out that fast. Humans are a tensegrity model due to our web of fascia. The spokes on the tire hold that wheel together. And hopefully that your spokes in your body are symmetrical. The neck on this giraffe is held up by ligaments and fascial tissue. Not as much muscle. That'd be a really tight neck if it was just all muscle holding up that giraffe's head. That's a tensegrity model, the way our body works. A suspension bridge. I have a really good one I brought. A toy about hijinks. It's a great tensegrity model, and it's basically the wood parts are bone, and the elastic parts are your fascial tissue. And every time your fascial tissue, some people might have tight fascial tissue here, but it lengthens fascial tissue over here. So sometimes you need to tighten up some areas to keep some other areas of your body mobile. And hopefully you're as symmetrical as you possibly can be. And this also shows, don't worry about these little balls, but your bones are floating, and your muscles are floating in fascia. There's no direct connection between muscles and bones. You're floating under tension. Conservative law. So we're going to do a little body break. I'm going to get you everyone to stand up for 1 second. We're not going to do an aggressive stretch because you've been sitting a while and you've had some plastic deformation through your spinal cord. And it takes, says Stuart McGill, that if you've been sitting for a while, it takes a good 30 minutes before you should get really aggressive with your body. So what we're going to do is you're going to do a hip hinge, your butt back a little bit. You're going to open up your hands this way, thumbs out. You're going to lift your chest up, squeeze your abs, shoulder blades draw down, spread the floor with your feet. Big breath into your lower back, and then you're going to stand up. We're going to do 2 more of these. Hip hinge, butt back, spread the floor with your feet, shoulder blades down, squeeze your abs, stand up. We're going to do 1 more. Butt back, palms out, spread the floor with your feet, abs tight, shoulder blades down, and stand up. We'll go for a little pee break, and in 5 minutes we'll continue. Bye, Kim.